What's up, squad? From Reach Suite, I'm Colin Smith, and welcome to Cold Ones. It's the podcast with chilly questions and even colder ice cream. And today, we're joined by my dear friend, John Thackston. You know him as the CEO of SOAR Performance, one of the leading revenue technology and go-to-market consulting firms in the US, and as University of Georgia's Bulldogs' biggest season ticket holder. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks for having me, Colin. I'm really excited to be here.
Dude, I love the dogs, man. You can't escape the dogs.
Can't escape the dogs. Big dogs fan. Big dogs fan. So yeah, I got my helmet behind me with pride. You can't see it, but over here on the wall, there's a bunch of other dog stuff as well. So my office is sort of a little ode to the Georgia football team.
It's amazing, man. And for those who don't know, which is probably most people except for you, Toby, and my friends, John and I actually had the pleasure of going to a Georgia football game this year. And
We had a great time. So the Ole Miss game, it was a great time. We had a lot of fun in downtown Athens and also at the game. So it was awesome.
Athens has a place in my heart forever, by the way. I spoke about it within the last calendar week. I spoke about Athens, Georgia.
Well, we had a great time. That was a fun game. We had a great time. It rained a lot, but we had a great time. So.
Yeah, it did rain.
It did rain a lot. We had a great time. And you had, I think, the most intensive. I don't know how you got us connected with that RV setup, but I think that was the most RVs I've seen connected together in one place. So
there was like 8 RVs that framed up.
It was. I mean, honestly, I couldn't tell where they started and stopped. It felt sort of like being like inside the Matrix or something because you were just inside this big closed off area, and then you'd run into an RV, and then it was a lot. So.
There was rooms, there was closets,
there was rooms. I think there was a chandelier, in there somewhere. It was
3.
A lot. So,
I remember
3 chandeliers. Not one. So not one. Did 3.
John, it's great to see you. Thank you for making the time as always. We're super grateful to have you on the Cold Ones podcast. So, as you know, Cold Ones is part fun, part revenue wisdom, part ice cream.
Love that.
Strategically select.
I like to think of my life in those same 3 buckets, so I think that's good.
I'm a man of threes, John. I'm a man of threes. So part 1 is we're going to jump into some fun rapid fire questions. We're going to bring out our first ice cream, and then part 2, we're going to jump into some revenue wisdom. And I'm particularly excited. I'll get to it. I don't want to spoil it, but for this conversation for one reason, and I'll share why. But without further ado, you ready to jump into some personal?
Let's dive in.
All right.
Some rapid fire fun questions.
So, and I have to share, ice cream 1 is peaches and cream because this man is
Georgia.
Deep Georgia, brother.
From Georgia. So yeah, I really appreciate that. The peach and cream was very strong, really strong ice cream. It had a good, and also the brand you picked was pretty good. I'm a little surprised because just Tillamook from Oregon, not known for Southern tradition, but the peach ice cream very strong.
Good. Okay. Good.
Really good.
We've sampled a lot of ice creams here in our cold.
Would recommend if you like peach. I would highly recommend.
We're gonna have to do a stack ranking based on comments on ice cream and do like a montage at the end of the year.
Y'all should do that.
So jumping into it, first thing, something few people know about you that you'd like for more people to know.
Something that few people know about me, I would say most people that don't know me that well think I went to Georgia. So a fun unknown fact about me, I actually went to Washington Lee University because I played football there. I was neither big nor fast enough to play at the University of Georgia, so ended up playing at W&L. But that's probably one. And then I think the other one is that I'm sober. I've been sober for about 9 years now. And that's been a great addition to my life. Certainly don't need a round of applause, but I think especially in our profession, there's a lot of kind of substance use disorder stuff floating around. And I really enjoy my life. Number 2, I'm always happy to help people if they happen to be struggling with that particular topic. So,
dude, I love that, man.
That's probably a more meaningful answer than that I didn't go to Georgia. So,
well, I heard that you went to Washington Lee for the scholarship money. Georgia gave you an offer. Good enough.
I wouldn't go that far. So I wouldn't go that far.
That is a beautiful school, though, man. Yeah. As a Virginian, I have not been to Lexington, which is a shame, but I've only heard exclusively great things.
Really fun town, beautiful town. I played football 4 years, made a lot of great friends, met my wife there, so it was tremendously positive.
Win. All right, John. Number 2, what is a common misconception about you? I guess the Georgia one kind of is a misconception, but if you have
common misconception about me, that's interesting. I'm kind of what you see is what you get. So I don't know if there's too many misconceptions about me. I would say probably one misconception about me is that I I'm a little bit analytical. Like I don't seem analytical when you first meet me, but I'm a little bit analytical, and so I think sometimes people underestimate if that part of me. But in general, there's not a ton of misconceptions about me. So
We
what you
can
see is
do
pretty much
math.
what you get.
We can do
Yeah,
math in the
exactly.
South for
So
those
exactly
listening.
for those of us who don't know, yeah, exactly. I would, yeah, but there's not a ton of misconceptions. Like I'm pretty much what you see is what you get. There's not a lot of myths that I feel like need to be unveiled about myself. So
It's a tough question to answer. I'd have to think about it if someone asked me, actually. All right, funniest celebrity encounter. This is gonna be a good one.
Uh,
Feel it.
funny celebrity encounter without question. So I had a good friend that got married to a girl that was from Texas. Her family was really good friends with the Bush family. So George W. Bush was at the wedding, and it was a really big wedding, and I'd heard that George W. Bush was at the wedding. I was in the wedding, and so I'd heard he was there, but I hadn't seen him per se, and so I'm walking up to like the little stand where you get your little spring roll or whatever,
The fondue
and
pot, if you
the
will.
fondue pot or whatever it is. And so I look up and he's standing like 4 feet in front of me. And so we make eye contact and I literally just blurt out, I go, "You're George W. Bush." And he just looks at me and he was like, "I am." And I was like, "Man, that's awesome. What was your favorite part of being president?" And he was like, "Oh man, that's a great question." He's like, "You get to do all this incredible stuff. You can travel all over the world. You can throw out the first pitch at a baseball game, and it's all free." And I was like, "That's the most relatable answer. I think that's the most relatable answer
Yeah,
that I've probably." I'm like, I think if you asked me if I was president, like, what did I enjoy about it? I'd try to say the same thing.
that's
So
awesome. That's
super
awesome.
relatable answer.
Hey, good for
And
you.
he was super nice and super gracious. But he was a super classy, nice guy. So I really enjoyed meeting him.
Yeah, yeah, he seems like a fun guy to meet. I will say that's a great just on your feet question because I too have a run-in with a celebrity at a wedding. It was Pusha T,
Oh
the
wow, a very kind of a different genre than George W. Bush. Sort of different genre, but yes,
president of good music, president of the United States of America.
like
Yeah,
that. Both presidents, just of different things.
just different things. So my buddy and I go to this wedding. We knew Pusha T was there, kind of similar. You kind of hear the buzz, and I'm like, if I see him, I'm gonna be really cool. I'm gonna be cool about it, and I've got this under control. I was in college at the time, and
You
we
got this.
walk up to the bar, and Pusha, informally known, turns around, and as he turns around, my buddy, who's pretty broad, shoulder checks him, spills his drink, not quite like all over
No
him,
way.
but like everywhere,
No
clearly
way.
everywhere. Shoulder checks Pusha T,
That's amazing.
and Pusha T was very nice. He was like, "Oh gosh, gee," I think he even apologized. He was like, "Oh, sorry about that," and my friend's like, "No, I'm so sorry." And then he kind of we get him some napkins. He walks past me. I just go, "Thanks for rapping Virginia Beach so hard." That's all.
That's awesome.
That's it.
That's
I had
awesome.
nothing else to
That's
say.
awesome. I think it helped. I think I was helped in the scenario by the shock factor in the sense that I wasn't expecting to see him, and I just looked up as I was getting my spring roll or whatever, probably like eating it, probably eating like bear pawing it or something. And I think the fact that I wasn't expecting to see him helped a lot. So I think if I had known that he was there, it would have been much harder.
Dude, if no, I think if it was me trending by my poor performance, I'd just be like, "Thank you for
For being president, man,
thank
you
you for
did
being
great.
president."
Thank you for being president. That's awesome. That's
All right,
awesome. So
last
yeah.
one.
This
Last
is
one
probably the only podcast where people have talked about Pusha T and George W. Bush in the same
in the same 1 minute
in the
period.
same section. So for those listening,
We
treasure
bring
this.
we bring everyone together here. Most recent shoe purchase.
Most recent shoe purchase. There's a brand called Echo that makes sort of like little leather sneakers. Super comfortable. Highly recommend them. They're great. They transition really nicely between like work and non-work. So ECCO, it's a Swedish company, like most comfortable kind of leather sneaker type things that I've ever found. So they're my preferred. They're my preferred work slash kind of nice casual shoe.
Could one assume that it was the soft 7?
It was a soft 7, exactly. It
Come
was the
on.
soft 7. So the
Nice.
Echo Soft 7, highly recommend. Highly recommend the Echo Soft 7. Yeah. So I don't know if you maybe we'll get sponsored by them now, but if they offer to sponsor your show, I want to cut. So
That's hilarious. I've been on the fence about buying some soft 7s, if you will, for probably 2 years. And I think you
yeah,
just pushed me over.
super comfortable. They're super comfortable. I'm a huge
Yeah.
fan.
They
So
look good too.
and
All
yeah,
right,
and nice looking.
John, that was fun, man. As I always say, like people know who you are from LinkedIn. People know the photo, the name, but not everyone gets a little peek under the hood of who really is John Thackston. And it's fun to just chop it up and humanize a little bit, right?
Love that.
So transitioning into part two, this is where we talk about revenue wisdom. This is where I'm
Yep.
really, really pumped to speak with you specifically because most of the folks, if you look at our kind of our episode list, it's amazing people, but they're all operators of one company.
Yep.
And every once in a while, I think you're the second individual to come on the show that's been a consultant. And
Yep.
what's beautiful about that is you get to take a little bit of a slice across a lot of companies. And so I really
Mhm.
want to channel and tap into your I guess just your wide breadth of different organizations that you talk to
For
and
sure.
trends that you're seeing. So before we get started, ice cream number two, my man just
The Talenti coffee, pretty strong, like very good ad. So I really enjoyed the Talenti coffee. I give it also a thumbs up. The problem about me is I'm not a great ice cream critic because in general I really like ice cream. So I'm like if it's above like sort of low end
cold.
soft serve, if it's cold, I'm probably in on it.
I'm
So
good. Well,
I'm
you
not I'm
just had
not
a
I'm not like your first guest, Mike McDonough, who's like an ice cream savant. So Mike, I
I
asked
know.
Mike what his favorite ice cream was, and he was like naming off like random places he had been that had like a very specific ice cream. And I was like, you're on a whole other level. So
He still to this day is the only person that's brought their own ice cream to the show. He said and it was a surprise. He didn't tell me. He was just like, Colin, I brought some private stock.
oh
Pop.
yeah, I mean there's not a lot of people that know more about ice cream than Mike McDonough. So that's and I mean that with the ultimate reverence. So
And you connected. Oh yeah, it comes full circle. Well, John, I'm excited. You did just have a baby. I think you
at
said,
a 4 month old, so the coffee ice cream did help with a little
yeah.
boost this afternoon, which I very much
We
appreciated.
we
So
need you. We need you here. We need you. You clicking.
you got me at least 80% strength. So we'll see what we can do.
All right, so like I mentioned, I'm excited to kind of slice through all the different organizations you chat with. Obviously, leaving
For
names
sure.
out, but just correlating and or consolidating all these learnings. I feel like with the growth at all cost mentality that venture-backed organizations were pushing the last several years, I'd imagine there were some investments made, habits formed, and
Mm-hmm.
operations set in place that are now being unwound, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of rolled back. Um, what comes to mind when you think about some of these habits or operations or
Yeah,
just investments that in general are being reversed right now? Just they were
for
not
sure.
serving.
Yeah, for sure. I think, well, it's actually interesting, right? Because if you look at what's happening now, it's not super dissimilar to when we first started our business in 2009, 2010. It feels a little more extreme because the funding level, there was a bigger bubble. But like
Yeah.
the bigger, like more macro thing that I see right now is we've moved from a positive demand environment to a slowing demand environment. So if you look at enterprise software spend, right? If you look at enterprise software spend in total, it's still growing a lot, still growing and growing a lot, and it's only going to grow more, right? If you look at 2020, from the recent Gartner report, like 529 billion was the TAM for enterprise software. If you look at what they're projecting in 2030, it's going to be like 1.3 trillion. So if you look at that, we're at 2024 right now. It's still going to basically double over the next 6 years.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's different now is the pace at which spend is growing feels a lot more decelerated, and also like software companies buying from other software companies has also slowed down a lot, obviously, as they've all hit headwinds. So I think those two things have made the environment feel tougher. But back to your point of like what's different now. So I've been through a few of these cycles now, and when you go from I'm going to call it environment where people are reacting to demand to an environment where you have to create demand, a few different things happen, right? So like all of a sudden your marketing and your selling effort largely have to focus on convincing people that they have a problem rather than that your widget is the best solution to a problem that they're already trying to spend money to solve. So like that fundamentally changes a lot of how you have to market, sell, approach how you build the business case collaboratively with customers. So one of the big trends I see right now is like organizations that have been used to a more demand reaction oriented environment where they're reacting to and fulfilling a healthy amount of demand, they're having to really like figure out how do they go and actually sell and create demand,
Mhm.
which that's pretty different. And that touches a lot of things, right? So that's everything from how you market being focused on like what's the value of solving this problem versus my thing solves the problem the best. That's a big change. Then you get into sort of your SDR, BDR world where all of a sudden it's not just about, hey, we've got the best solution, but hey, here's why you should prioritize this problem above other problems when you think about spending money. Then you've got from your AE community, it's a lot more about building the business case rather than just kind of, hey, here's our thing and here's why we're the best option. And then if you think about sort of the pre-sales community, I think one of the things that they're getting stretched a lot into is like, how do they become co-participants in the creation of a change narrative versus just, hey, technically we meet your specifications, right? So that changes sort of how you have to think about every role and every touch point, not even to mention when you get into CS. In the CS world, you know, for a long time, it was all about, hey, if we do a good job of doing adoption, we're going to expand. Now you're getting seat contraction. So like that's one headwind you're facing against. Plus, you're not getting as much new logos, so you want more expand. That changes a lot, like how you set up your CS motion as well.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, I fortunately and unfortunately I built Reach Suite in the face of the storm, right? And so I think we were born with the muscle memory of ROI models, business case, foreign
Yeah.
business cases on call three, so you can elevate to the economic buyer. Things that I'm surprised when you talk to some pretty large organizations are like, whoa, revolutionary. Um, do you feel like organizations in general are making the switch or slow to, or is that why you exist to help them make the switch?
Depends, right? I mean, we would be out of business if everybody knew how to do this all on their own. Like we wouldn't have,
Mhm.
I'd have to get into a different business. So I don't know,
Mhm.
maybe I'd get in the RV business or something and, host tailgates at dogs games. I don't know what I do, but yeah,
I like that.
that might be my next step. No, but that's it, right? So different organizations are dealing with this at a different pace, right? Like I think some organizations were very proactive about how they've dealt with this. I think a lot of it also depends on, to a large extent, has your leadership team been through something like this before? So like one of the things that I'm seeing is if you
Mhm.
have leadership teams that have existed through, if they're maybe like in the, we'll call it very seasoned bucket, Y2K, great financial crisis, past couple years, right? Like they're sort of like, okay, hey, we get this. We're moving into a softer demand environment. Here's kind of how we need to think about this. I think a lot of people who have grown up and become executives in the past 12 years have not actually known a contracting demand environment or a more difficult demand environment. So I think that group has had a harder time than others.
That's really interesting. I think there's a lot to be said about just the game time footage that an executive has seen.
For
And
sure. And like
you
if you
can't
if you
buy.
live through Y2K, like if you live through Y2K, you're like, okay, like this kind of makes sense what's happening, and I understand how we move through this. Like if you've only existed in an era where, venture money was super plentiful and there was a lot of opportunity and you were, not having to create demand, like I think that it's probably really hard right now.
Do you have any, without giving away secret sauce here, but do you have any tried and true tactics or advice that folks could be thinking about deploying to switch from a target rich environment
Yeah, yeah.
to
Oh
a
yeah, for sure. I mean, number one is like, so I think if you go to the very top of I'm going to start from like marketing down, right? So I could talk about this for probably 2 hours, but I'll try and drop the most salient points
yeah,
and then you can ask whatever you want to after that. So if you think about marketing down, the very top of your funnel, you got to get much tighter on ICP and personas. You got to have a really clear understanding of who is not, when I say ICP, a lot of times people talk about ideal customer profile. It's like, who are the best customers, not the ideal customer in a theoretical sense, but like, who is the most ready buyer for what we do?
yep.
What type of companies have the most acute problem in the area that we solve for and are like willing to pay? Then that narrows the focus, right? Then after that, you got to look at how do we market? How do we market to those people? And in a lot of cases, I think one of the hardest things for people to switch is marketing the problem rather than marketing the solution. So like, how do we market the problem that you have and the value of solving that
Yeah.
problem in a demand, constrained environment? You're not actually competing for, is my thing the best? You're competing for, can I get budget dollars allocated to my project?
Am I
Right.
in the
And why
top
is
three
this,
of things that's
why
going
is this
to
exactly why am I in the top three things? And that's really about two things. One is what problem are we solving, but also like how does that attach up to a strategic priority that people care about? Because I think one thing that's kind of a fallacy about problem-led marketing is like that problem also has to attach to really important corporate priorities. Otherwise, you run out of funding at the level of your champion, right? Like
Yeah.
however much discretionary funding your champion has, if that problem cannot be attached up to like a really important corporate priority, that gets really hard. So I think that's number two is kind of how we market has to get much more about marketing the value of solving the problem, much less about why our thing is the best. Then from an and a SDR and an AE perspective, right? Like we have a company right now that we're working with. They've set their meetings set goal. They've set their meetings set record, excuse me, like 5 months in a row during a period that's like pretty hard to sell because
Yeah.
they've tightened down their ICP. They've focused on the true problem that they solve. They've focused their outbound efforts like on the right types of buyers that align with that, and
Yeah.
they've focused on a value-based selling motion, right? That like when times are good, everyone can talk about, quote, it's important to sell on value. But honestly, if there's a ton of demand for your product, like you can get away with not doing that. And like it can
Yeah.
work pretty well. In an environment where there's CFO scrutiny on $25,000 worth of spend, like actually understanding how to value sell and operationalizing that in your organization, which is like I mean, that's a big topic, but like that's a really, really big deal in times like this.
Yeah. And I have a theory. I talked about this on a podcast I was actually on. I think the ICP lack of ICP diligence starts with VCs. Think about what your
Yeah,
pitch.
yeah.
Think about what a founder's pitch deck, and then once they go for their ABC, what the
Well, it's
CROs.
funny. It's funny because we work with a lot of investment firms and portfolio companies, and like one of the things that we have to work with people on is like deprogramming the thought of like, hey,
Damn.
we can, yeah,
Damn.
you have to deprogram from like TAM, you know, you have to deprogram from TAM to like service addressable market to service obtainable market, and within that, like who are truly the customers that like we can win right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like as a founder, I think it's a really, I think it's the epitome of cognitive dissonance. You're beat into your head for so long that you
Yeah,
need.
yeah. It's a hard flip, right? Well, the other part
Yeah,
is,
it's
especially
really
if
hard.
you're a founder, like that also means in many ways you're a visionary, right? So you can see how all these different organizations could benefit from our product. It's hard to peel it back and say, okay, these people could benefit from our product, but like this is who like needs our product at this moment.
Yeah, right now. Because
And
really,
then yeah, no, keep going.
I was just say at the end of the day, you're on a sprint. If you're a seed stage company, you're on a sprint to $1 million
Yeah,
in ARR. If you're a company, you're on a sprint to five. You're, B company, you're on a sprint to whatever B standards are today. But you're on a sprint to that. It's
yeah,
not about that's all it comes down to when you go raise, right? And in many,
yeah.
I mean, there are other things, AI
There's
versus.
other things, but like there's a lot that goes into that book. Well, I think that's a whole nother point we talk about AI is like that's the other thing that's really hard is when you look at funding right now, there's a lot of funding going into AI. And if you're not in that bucket, that's pretty tough. So and then I think to your question though, on the CS side, like on the post sale side of the house, like what do people need to do in a demand constrained environment? The big thing I see is two things. One is when times get tough, one of the first things people want to do is squeeze their customer base for money, which like counterintuitively is actually ends up being a really bad idea in the long run. Now it can help you if you're an executive at a company and your lifespan is 18 months, like you can kind of do the math on like, is this a good decision for you or not? It's like, I don't want to like take that. I can take that. I don't want to be unrealistic about this because
Yeah.
like at the end of the day, if you're a CRO or a chief customer officer, you've got an 18-month life cycle, you can decide to the extent to which you want to squeeze your customer base. From a company perspective, I think making sure that CS doesn't accidentally become the customer squeezing department is really important, right? Because all of a sudden they get tasked with like, go talk to these customers about upgrading, push for more seats, do all this stuff. So I think number one is like, make sure that doesn't happen. But number two, if you look at customer success and where customer success is today, I spend a lot of time talking about this in the post-sale side of the house, is customer success was kind of born out of a combination of like a bunch of weird different functions. So like
Yeah.
the theory behind customer success was like, we're going to have this department that helps our customers realize value from our products. The reality of customer success is that it ended up being a really weird mishmash of what used to be called professional services, implementation, account management, and like tier one support. And so that's what like customer success does now. And so I think companies that are doing a good job in this environment are also flipping that on their head and saying, hey, we need to focus customer success on value realization and get rid of all this other stuff and like get super clear on people talk a lot about customer journey, which I think is really a misnomer. You need to be focused on value realization journey, as in like
Yeah.
what needs to happen for a customer to realize value as quickly as possible, and how do we instrument everything we do to make that happen. And if it doesn't support that, we get rid of it. And so I think on the CS side, that sounds like really fundamental, but it's the reality today in most organizations is very far from that.
I think there's a lot of missteps happening in post-sale side of the house. I mean, our first go-to-market hire, and granted, the reason why it was because I think I was a traditional sales founder.
Yeah,
So I handled the, pre-sales. But was a customer success manager because we were signing customers.
yeah,
Thank goodness gracious, very blessed for that. And we need people to take care of them so they're happy, so they renewed, so they
yeah,
expanded, so
100%.
their usage was strong. So I said, I'm not good at that. That's not my skill set. CS leader, plug that in. That was our first go-to-market hire. And I don't know about you, but I think a lot of people fell asleep in marketing 101 in undergrad when the teacher got up there and said it costs 5 times as much.
Yeah, yeah.
Get a
To get
new
a new
customer.
customer. Yeah,
Then like
exactly.
that was like I think I was in like an entrepreneurship class in junior year of high school. And
Yeah.
Miss Durbin was talking about that. And then like
That wise sage, Miss Durbin.
Miss
So
Durbin, shout out to you. And it's I don't know. I think people forgot about that, fell asleep in that part of the class, or just don't care. And maybe pressure makes people do weird things, but I think we gotta go back
well,
to
I think
a little bit.
I think the other part to your point though is that like it's you got to do both, right? Because you can't only do existing and you can't only do new logo. It's actually not an or, it's an and I think that is where people get sometimes lost. And so I think the other part is the way that customer success has been set up in a lot of organizations has been actually set up to fail in many cases because they took this amalgamation of responsibilities that used to be cleanly delineated, dumped it all into this one role. And I think that's also part of the strain that you're seeing in that side of the house.
Interesting. Interesting. Do you know, last question on this, and we jump in one more. Do you know, like I know Gainsight, evangelized CS. Mike Berger, we
Yeah.
had on the show a few episodes ago as their head of marketing Gainsight. He talked all about the brand, creating the brand of customer success. But where did it actually start? What was like the
Yeah,
or
Salesforce. So like everything else in the Salesforce had the original like customer success department. I think even back in 2004, 2005. And at that point in time, right, it was actually so the original charter of customer success was very much focused on adoption, right? Because if you go back in time, I'm going to sound super old, but my dad was in the software business for a long time. So like 2004, 2005, we got to keep in mind it was not yet clear that all software would eventually not that much of software would eventually become consumed via cloud and subscription. Now, if you look at the total population of software, there's actually still a ton that's on-prem, but a lot of like the growth, the momentum has been in as a service. So historically, if you had on-prem software, like you didn't have to worry about adoption because it was your customer's problem. Like they bought a license, it was their problem if they adopted or not. Like you didn't care if they adopted. So
yeah.
Salesforce was sort of the first company that started to reach scale in an as a service model. So they kind of came up with a customer success concept, which was focused predominantly on
Drive it down.
driving adoption. Because that was the first time, like it was the first time that adoption mattered in the software business. Because before the customer owned it, it was their issue.
Right. Interesting. Well, I suppose would agree, but I mean, I remember buying a Windows disk and then like 2 years later going buy another Windows disk. And in theory, if you weren't adopting it, you probably wouldn't go buy the new one, right?
That's true. That's true. But the financial incentives were different because the upfront payments were so big, right? So like if you're selling an on-prem software deal, you're getting all paid up front. Like I'm thinking about it more from a like
Yeah. Yeah.
AE perspective. So like, and then
Amortized.
there's maintenances, there's upgrade. Like, don't get me wrong, maintenance upgrades, all those things. Like, there's a part of that, but the incentives were so much more front loaded on the vendor
Yeah.
side that like financially you didn't care as much, right? Because you're getting, just as an example, you're getting $10 million up front rather than five $2 million each payments that could go up or down if you have seat compression.
Yeah. 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 Interesting. I did not know Salesforce was the inventor of CI or that, not whatever they call it.
At least so far as I know, they were really the
Yeah.
first. They were really the first company that pioneered it.
Yeah. Makes
Because
sense
of that
though. It's a
issue,
good history.
which was, historically you didn't have an issue with adoption, and now you need, at that point in time, adoption became a really big deal.
Yeah. John, last question before we close things out here. It's a bit of a hot topic. It's one that I'm hearing a lot of different folks going in two different directions. And
Don't spend too much time on LinkedIn. It's actually not good for your brain development, I don't think. Anyways, I'm excited to hear what comes next. So hit me with the hot topic.
is outbound dead? And let me tell you something,
Yeah.
let me tell you something real quick. I was in Boston 2 weeks ago at a stage 2 Capital event, and I'm sitting there with the VP of sales at an organization that is interests aligned to outbound, and then a CEO. And I said, hey man, like hope all is well. Like, tough time for the sector. If there's anything I can do for you, let me know. He's like, great time for the sector. What do you mean? Outbound's thriving, outbound's doing great.
Yeah,
Like, oh, okay. Like, cool. Good for you.
that's
And
awesome.
then the CEO next to me, who actually is in a growth stage organization, I think Series C, he goes, I gotta say we cut our SDR team. I think like they had 17, they cut 9. He was like, and we're
Yeah.
still in the same pipeline. So to me, outbound's dead. Not saying this isn't. This is just a story
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
been real in my life, and
100%. So I think the issue is right that it's very so is outbound dead is actually like there's a bigger upstream question, which is like so at the end of the day, you talk about marketing 101, like eventually we all have to get new customers and that basically involves turning people that don't know about us into people that do know about us. And I think the real question is like what is outbound's efficacy in doing that? And also, how do we define outbound, right? So if you think
yeah,
about the definition of outbound is we hire SDRs, we give them dirty data, we give them a list, and we say, hey, pound the phone. That is a diminishing effort, return on effort sort of situation. But
yeah,
like that's true of a lot of different marketing channels. So let's go back in time. So if you go back to the 80s or the 70s, right? Like the primary way that you did cold calls, you literally walked into somebody's office and like introduce yourself and like said, hey,
yeah,
can I spend 15 minutes to tell you about the latest Xerox machine? Which like
yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm not sure the last person I know that just like walked into someone's office,
I did
especially in
medical
DC,
device sales.
especially in DC, medical device sales. Okay, medical device sales, that counts, that is true.
Yeah,
But like DC, like you walk to somebody's office, like you walk in the NSA office on accident, like you
not
could be on
happening.
the no-fly list. Like that, that's a
Red
real
dot.
thing, right? So right, exactly. So but like in all seriousness, when people talk about is outbound dead, I think the real discussion is the way that people are doing outbound working, yes or no? And if it's not, what do they need to do differently, right? So I talked about this company we're working with earlier. They're on fire from an outbound perspective. Like they are setting like they're setting every month, they are setting a record
Yeah,
for most meetings in the history of their company. Now, other organizations, I think we have another organization we work with that they used to have a super clean correlation between how much revenue each SDR added to their organization. So they had a model that said every SDR they hired, they could roughly correlate $2.5 to $3 million worth of revenue coming out of that SDR based on the pipeline they generated. That's now down to like 1.6. And so the reality is it's very company dependent. It's also
yeah,
market dependent. And
yeah,
it's like, are you doing it right dependent? So like,
yeah,
I think is outbound dead or not is a stupid question. Cause like the first question is like, to get new customers, you have to find people that don't know you and get them to know you. So like that has to happen somehow. Now, I think a better question is like, is the way that people do inbound working, which you can double click into a bunch of different types.
yeah. Very interesting. Thanks for taking that direction. John,
Sorry,
what
that won't be a good hot take tweetable answer. It's probably a little too nuanced,
no,
but anyways,
it depends, attorney
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
No, you're right though. It's is outbound dead? Absolutely not. You will always do outbound,
that's
but
right,
is this traditional turn and burn, load up 1,000 people into a
that's right.
list and drill it? That's not good.
It's just not working. But like in the same way that like walking into someone's office to sell like a new piece of technology is like not working now either. And like if you
Yeah,
go back in time, like everybody freaked out. I mean, there's a guy named Todd Capone I really like on LinkedIn that does like breakdowns of historical sales books and stuff. And so like
yeah,
there was a book in the 1920s or 1910s or whatever that was like is the newspaper going to kill the salesman? It was like a
yeah,
major topic. Like, will newspapers which like I don't think anybody today is like, will newspapers take out, will newspapers kill outbound? Is not like an active discussion we're having. So I think it's important to keep it all contextualized as well.
Will the chat bot kill the
Will
modern?
the chatbot? Well, I'll tell you one. So if you want a funny story, here's a funny story about chatbots. So this will be really good. So I was on the phone with a customer. I won't say who it is, but it's a pretty well known company, and I was on the phone with them, and they were talking me through like some recent marketing things they had done, and they were like, "Hey, we had this huge spike in engagement on our website a couple weeks ago." And I was like, "Oh, that's really cool. What happened?" And they were like, "Well, it's really funny. We actually bought one chatbot from Drift and one chatbot from Intercom, and we plugged them both into the website to do an A/B test. And they just talked to each other for a day and a half until somebody realized that our two chatbots were just pushing scripts back and forth So
ridiculous.
they pull up this dashboard. They pull up this dashboard, and it's like
Stop, dude.
it's showing their website engagement. It's all sort of like trending in this sort of normal way, and then it goes like off the screen, and then comes back down like 2 days later. And I was like, "Well, what happened there?" And they're like, "Well, the two chatbots just talked to each other for like 26 straight hours."
I need to know, are the chatbots dating? Did they hit it off?
Yeah, I think they actually just shipped back and forth. Do you want demo requests? And they'd be like, "Do you want a demo request?" They'd be like, "No." "Do you want to request a demo?" They're like, "No." "Do you want to request a demo?" So
They had a 26-hour draw.
they had exactly like in the end. I don't think anybody got a demo. So I think in the
Don't,
end,
don't
end
you blink
result,
drift. Don't you?
end result was no demo. I think. But
That's
yeah,
hilarious. That's a
pretty
really good
funny.
story, John. All right, before we go, sales, marketing, in your case, being a revenue, technology consultant is a team sport, right? It is
For sure.
very much a multifaceted game. And I like to just ask, man, who are some folks you want to shout out? Who are some folks that you worked with, whether they're champions at clients, whether they're people at SOAR, whether they're
Oh
people
yeah, for sure.
who's
I mean,
on the outside?
first would definitely have to be first definitely have to be my dad. So my dad actually started the company together. So like he was a big part of us starting the business. I learned a ton from him. So definitely my dad, number one. Number two, let's see, we had an early customer, Eric Sevis at Verizon. He ended up being the president of global wholesale there. He's one of our early customers. And I learned a ton from Eric over the years. He recently retired, but great person. And I just learned a lot about how to, the thing I always liked about him is he had a really big job at Verizon. I don't know where he sat in their kind of pecking order, but he was in the top 10 or so people at Verizon. So he had a big job, and he was a really good person. Like he showed me how to be a good ethical person and also like do the right thing and also be in like a kind of position of authority or like a kind of a big position. So I learned a lot from him. Let's see who else. I would say, you met Toby. Like Toby's been a great customer friend. Like he's created a lot of great Toby Carrington at Seismic's created a lot of great opportunities for us. His former boss, Ed Calvin, I've really enjoyed working with him over the years. Let's see, a guy named Tony Smart at Gainsight. He kind of helped build our partnership with them. So they resell a lot of our services. We go to market together with them. He created a lot of that. Like that wouldn't have happened without him. And see who else. There's a guy named Alan Brown was he's now at Microsoft, but we sold a deal to him when we were first starting, and I don't know that we'd be where we are today without him. I mean, I remember
Yeah,
like every customer we've had, like, you probably get this like in your world, like there's some times where things are just not going as great for a quarter or two or whatever, and you're kind of like, hey, like, how is this all going to work out, and like, are we moving in the right direction? And so like I remember every customer we've ever signed almost. There might be a couple that I don't remember, but like I remember
yeah,
most every customer I've ever signed. And you definitely remember those where like you're not sure, like, are we going in the right direction? And then you like get that win, So we'd had a tough couple of quarters, and we won a big
yeah.
deal with Alan, and that created a lot of belief for us.
Yeah, that's a big life, business moment, but life moment, right?
Yeah,
When
yeah.
you're closing the deals yourself as the founder, they mean a little bit different.
They mean a lot. Well, and two, you have a couple tough quarters, you start doubting yourself a little bit. You're like wondering, like, hey, are we really moving in the right direction? And so I definitely remember too long of a list to go through, but every one of our customers that we've ever, really all our customers, we wouldn't be here without our customers. So I
Yeah.
appreciate every last one of our customers. So
Shout out to the SOAR customers. Well, as always, John, thank you so much for your time, man. Really excited to have you. You escaped without a brain freeze. Hopefully you're
escape without a brain freeze. So my conditioning is not as strong as Mike McDonough. So I was a little worried I might be too weak, but escape without a brain freeze. Loved both the peach and the Talenti coffee. So really enjoyed both.
absolutely, John. Thanks for your
Thanks for
time.
having me. This was a lot of fun. Take care, Colin.